Raise your glasses for a refreshing pint of beer. Did you know that this simple beverage carries a history of 10,000 years? Beer has been enjoyed since prehistoric times, quaffed by various civilizations including hunter-gatherers, pyramid builders, pharaohs, Vikings, the Inca, and the Irish. From jugs and horns to steins, and even through golden straws piercing warm, crusty yeast cakes, beer has been savored in diverse ways throughout history. Now, let's explore the intriguing history of beer and its role in human civilization. How did this beverage save humanity, and can a hangover be considered a religious experience? Let's delve into the past and find out. Our story takes us back 13,000 years ago to the Levant and Turkey, where people fermented wild grains to make beer for feasts and rituals, long before the advent of settled farming. Beer, essentially liquid bread, is made by fermenting grains such as barley, wheat, or rice with water. This process is enabled by yeast, tiny single-celled fungi found everywhere, which convert sugars in the grains into alcohol. Even leaving mushed-up grains out can attract wild yeasts, starting the fermentation process. A dough from fermented mush yields bread, while a more liquid version becomes beer. Initially, scholars believed that humans settled and began farming to secure a steady grain supply for making bread. However, hunter-gatherers enjoyed better diets, shorter workdays, and healthier lives compared to early farmers. So, why would they transition to become hard-working, bread-consuming farmers? The answer lies beyond mere sustenance. Possibly, around 10,000 years ago, hunter-gatherer groups would gather to party and enjoy beer made from wild grain. Realizing they could maintain a steady supply of grain for beer by staying in one place and farming, they settled down. The allure of beer and the festivities associated with it might have convinced them to form settled communities, which eventually led to the development of civilizations under the governance of kings, pharaohs, and priests. The first farmers in Mesopotamia had to cultivate and maintain their lands, leading to the formation of communities that built infrastructure, including irrigation canals for their crops. As grain production increased, they needed to learn how to store, process, and distribute it, giving rise to writing, governments, and militaries to protect these valuable resources. Civilizations emerged, and with them came the complexities of societal organization. So, perhaps, our craving for beer played a vital role in the creation of human civilization as we know it. Beer and bread quickly became symbols of civilized societies, transcending time and cultures. The history of this humble beverage is truly awe-inspiring. During the 3rd millennium BCE, the Epic of Gilgamesh was authored by the ancient Sumerians. The narrative revolves around Enkidu, a wild man residing outside the bounds of civilization. The city-dwelling king, Gilgamesh, endeavors to civilize Enkidu and employs the services of Shamhat, a temple prostitute, to tame him. After spending time together, Shamhat advises Enkidu to partake of bread and beer, which transforms him from a wild man into a proud Sumerian citizen, possibly symbolizing the transformation experienced by the Sumerians themselves. Both the Mesopotamians and Egyptians brewed a variety of beers, catering to different tastes and social strata, including offerings for the living and the deceased. Egypt even entombed special beer that would not turn sour to ensure the enjoyment of the deceased in the afterlife. The tomb of King Scorpion I from the 3200s BCE contained over 2,000 beer vessels, contrasting with the limited beer provisions for ordinary Egyptians after death. During the era of the first farmers, the process of transforming grains into beer, attributed to yeast, appeared mystical and linked to divine influence. Egyptian mythology features the god Osiris as the bestower of brewing knowledge to humans. Additionally, the tale of Ra's daughter, Hathor, illustrates the pivotal role of beer, as it curtailed her murderous rampage and saved humanity, as the beer caused her to pass out peacefully. Hathor became closely associated with beer, and the Tekh festival in Egypt celebrated drunkenness in her honor. Sumeria also valued beer greatly, and Ninkasi, the goddess of beer, was revered. Beer consumption in Sumeria involved drinking thick frothy brews from communal jugs, using reed or gold straws to filter out floating bits during fermentation. The nutritional benefits of ancient beer were significant, as it provided vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fiber, compensating for the dietary deficiencies in early farming communities. In Egypt, pharaohs and nobles enjoyed elaborate spiced beers, while workers received simpler versions. Women working in Sumerian temples received 2 liters of beer daily, while children were given 1 liter. Beer played a substantial role in various cultures and historical events. In Nubia, fermenting beer was employed to create antibiotics centuries before penicillin's discovery. In China, beer production traces back to 7000 BCE, made from rice, berries, and honey. In the Shang dynasty, excessive beer consumption by Emperor Xian contributed to the downfall of his reign. In Scandinavia, beer and mead played significant roles in diplomacy, marriages, and funerals, fostering strong communal bonds. Norse warriors known as berserkers purportedly achieved enhanced strength during battle through the consumption of psychoactive beer or mead, despite the accompanying risks of hallucinations, delirium, seizures, coma, and death. Some researchers speculate that the hallucinogenic substance used by the berserkers, fierce Viking warriors, may have been henbane. This particular plant has been discovered in various European archaeological sites, including Skara Brae, an ancient brewery dating back to around 3000 BCE during the Neolithic period. Interestingly, the Celts also appear to have incorporated henbane into their beer-making process. Unfortunately, much of our knowledge about Celtic beer comes from Roman sources, who had a disdain for beer. However, it's worth noting that the wine-loving Romans had more involvement with beer than commonly believed. The term beer is derived from the word beer, which has its roots in Old Germanic languages. Some experts believe that beer might have evolved from the older Germanic term bera. On the other hand, other scholars argue that beer made its way into German via the Latin word biber, which translates to a drink or a beverage. In today's world, most countries have a word that closely resembles beer to describe the alcoholic beverage. However, Spanish speakers chose the term cerveza, possibly influenced by the beer-averse Romans and derived from the Roman goddess of growth, Ceres. It's also plausible that cerveza came from a Celtic word for beer that later transformed into cervegia and eventually cerveza. During the early English period, the common word for beer was ale, which remains the term for beer in Scandinavia, known as ol, and in the Baltics, called alus. It wasn't until later that the word beer took over in the English language. Significant historical events, such as the fall of the Roman Empire, the invasion of Germanic tribes, and the rise of the Catholic Church, contributed to beer taking on a new role in everyday European life. One Catholic bishop, while visiting the Rhine River region, remarked that the people drank excessively, and only the grace of God allowed them to survive their drinking bouts. The Church, unable to curb the excessive drinking, decided to embrace the practice. It connected pagan festivities with Christian holidays, pairing Germanic Yule with Christmas and incorporating bonfire solstice rituals into St. John's Day celebrations. Monks, in particular, became skilled beer brewers during this period. Christian monks were avid travelers, and thanks to the Flemish monk William of Rubruck, we have knowledge of the Mongols' beer-drinking habits. In 1253, William visited Karakorum, the capital city of the Mongol Empire, and encountered a grand fountain. The fountain was an awe-inspiring silver tree with silver serpents coiling around it. The base of the tree had 4 silver lions, each spewing mare milk. The branches of the tree had 4 pipes that poured grape wine, fermented mare milk, rice beer, and honey mead into basins for the enjoyment of the drinkers. During medieval Europe, women played a vital role as primary brewers, especially in England, where they were known as alewives. However, as cities expanded, alewives saw an opportunity to profit from selling beer. In response, men swiftly took over brewing, as they had the advantage of being able to secure loans and establish guilds to protect and regulate their brewing businesses. Between the 13th and 15th centuries, female brewers known as aloes faced derogatory depictions, associating them with unattractive physical traits, and some even faced accusations of witchcraft, leading to their exclusion from the beer business as men took over. Prior to the 13th century, beer was brewed using a mix of herbs and spices called gruit, different from Gruit of Marvel fame. This concoction added flavor and extended the beer's preservation period, unlike in ancient Sumeria where beer had to be consumed immediately after fermentation. Taxing Gruit became an effective means of regulating and taxing beer production. However, Bavarians and Bohemians discovered a substitute for Gruit, hops. These peculiar-looking plants not only contributed bitterness and diverse flavors to beer, but were also cheap, untaxed, and had antimicrobial properties that enhanced beer preservation compared to Gruit. With beer lasting longer, some cities became significant beer exporters. For instance, by the 1400s, Hamburg, with a population of 15 to 20,000, produced an average of 30 million liters of hopped beer annually. As beer production increased, laws were enacted to regulate the process. The most famous of these was the 1516 Reinheitsgebot, or German purity law, mandating that only barley, hops, and water could be used in beer production. Remarkably, even 500 years later, the Reinheitsgebot continues to influence beer production in Germany. In 1553, Bavaria implemented a law prohibiting brewing during the summer due to concerns that the warm weather would spoil the beer. Brewing commenced in March, and the beer was left to ferment in cool caves until September, giving birth to Marzenbier or March beer. In 1810, a grand public celebration was held in Munich to commemorate the wedding of Prince Ludwig of Bavaria and Princess Therese. The festivities, which included parades, horse races, and plenty of beer, coincided perfectly with the opening of the Marzenbier barrels. The event's success led to the establishment of Oktoberfest, which continues today, attracting over 6 million visitors annually and consuming more than 7 million liters of beer, much of it being Marzenbier. In contrast, across the ocean, Andean societies since the 4th century BCE brewed their maize-based beers known as chicha. Women in these societies chewed maize to initiate fermentation and then proceeded to brew the beer. Chicha was used in various celebrations such as harvests, the New Year, weddings, and funerals. It was even offered to the sun and poured onto the ground during festivals, symbolizing the gods receiving their share first. The Inca civilization operated uniquely without currency or markets. Instead, citizens paid taxes through labor, and their basic needs were provided from state-owned warehouses. Massive feasts featuring thousands of liters of chicha were held to reward the people for their service to the state, resulting in an insatiable demand for beer. Cuzco, the Inca capital city, was called Akha Mama in the Quechua language, signifying this chicha mother. The Inca Empire focused on expanding maize production by cultivating new areas, creating colonies in fertile regions, and enhancing agricultural technology. This led to a boom in maize production, facilitated by their extensive road system, allowing efficient distribution and storage of grains across their vast mountainous empire. When the Spanish arrived and conquered the region, they attempted to ban chicha production, but Andean women tenaciously kept the tradition alive, ensuring the ancient drink continues to be enjoyed throughout South America. During the Revolutionary War against Britain in 18th century colonial America, American soldiers received daily rations that included approximately 1 liter of beer. Additionally, in 1780, General George Washington granted his troops a winter holiday on the 17th of March to celebrate St. Patrick's Feast, given the substantial number of Irish soldiers in the army. With the mass immigration of impoverished Irish people to America in the 19th century, St. Patrick's Day celebrations grew significantly. Today, over half of the U.S. population participates in these festivities, with cities like Chicago even dyeing their rivers green. In Ireland, celebrations include parades, dances, drinking, and cultural events like Seachtain na Gaelge or Irish Language Week. Globally, St. Patrick's Day sees over 13 million pints of Guinness, Ireland's renowned stout beer, being served, making it a day celebrated by people from diverse backgrounds and cultures worldwide. Arthur Guinness was among a group of pioneers who played a significant role in revolutionizing brewing during the Industrial Revolution. In 1759, he made the bold decision to establish his own brewery at St. James Gate in Dublin. The lease he signed for this venture was famously set for an astonishing 9,000 years at a rate of £45 per year. Although Arthur Guinness found success internationally and his beer was shipped worldwide, he faced the annoyance of living next door to his brewery and paying much higher rent than the nominal lease. Guinness beer became a global sensation, and its popularity reached distant lands. As early as 1963, the first foreign brewery opened in Nigeria, a mere 2 years after the country gained independence. The beverage gained immense popularity there, with some Nigerians even considering it their national beer, making Nigeria the world's second largest consumer of Guinness. For a considerable period in Ireland, Guinness was associated with good health. Doctors prescribed it to postoperative patients, blood donors, and pregnant women, believing it to be rich in iron. However, while industrial-scale brewing made Arthur Guinness and other factory owners wealthy, many workers suffered unfortunate accidents, such as being crushed by the industrial malt mill, drowning in beer vats, or asphyxiating from the CO2 generated during fermentation. Tragic incidents like the 1814 disaster in London, where a wooden vat burst, causing a beer tsunami that killed 8 people, brought attention to the hazards of brewing at such large scales. Notably, the Industrial Revolution not only transformed the brewing process but also influenced the preferences of consumers. As the British Empire expanded, tea and coffee from overseas colonies became widespread in Europe, and the emerging middle classes developed a liking for bitter beverages. This shift in taste led to the rising popularity of lighter and more bitter pale beers. Meanwhile, in British India, soldiers impatiently awaited their beer, and attempts to ship dark beers failed as they arrived stale and skunky. To combat this, breweries began sending paler beers packed with hops, known for their preservative properties. This resulted in the creation of Indian Pale Ale, or IPA for short. Imperial Germany's influence on the beer history of China was evident in the late 19th century. German naval troops were sent to Tsingtao to seize the Chinese fort in 1897. Afterward, a small village was established near the fort, and investors flocked to the area. Among them were the founders of Germania Brewery, which later became Tsingtao Brewery. Initially, Tsingtao beer adhered to the German Reinheitsgebot, purity law. However, after privatization in the 1990s, rice was added to the beer. Today, Tsingtao is China's second-largest brewery, accounting for over 17% of the domestic market and 4.4% of global beer production. The 19th century influx of Germans to America, totaling an estimated 2.8 million immigrants, played a transformative role in American beer history. Adolphus Busch was one such immigrant, who partnered with Eberhard Anheuser to establish what would become the world's largest beer company, Anheuser-Busch. Busch made significant advancements in beer production, including pasteurization and refrigeration. Inspired by his trip to Bohemia, he developed Budweiser, now one of the biggest beer brands globally. The beer's name caused tension with the Czechs, who had already brewed a beer called Budweiser for nearly 800 years. To avoid confusion, the American Budweiser is simply known as Bud in Europe. Presently, Anheuser-Busch's annual sales exceed $52 billion, representing almost 30% of the world market. Drunkenness in the United States had become a social issue by the end of the 19th century, prompting drastic measures. Prohibition, which lasted from 1920 to 1933, outlawed alcoholic beverages across the nation. This period was challenging for breweries that had thrived earlier, forcing them to sell alternative products like malt extract and tonics. After Prohibition, the brewing industry was dominated by large corporations, which became experts in marketing their mass-produced, bottled, and cheap beer. Refrigerators filled with cold beer became a common sight, and TV screens were adorned with beer advertisements. However, in the last 2 decades, small breweries have made a remarkable resurgence, crafting unique and diverse beers. Today, beer enthusiasts can enjoy a wide range of flavors, including beers like Gilgamesh, inspired by the earliest beers brewed in Sumeria. The beer production volume has grown significantly, with an average of 190 billion liters produced annually since 2010. Beer stands as the most consumed beverage globally, ranking second only to water and tea. Each time people raise a pint to toast friends, wish good health, celebrate a new union, or remember loved ones, they participate in a ritual that has been observed by humanity for the past 10,000 years. The allure of beer remains, even if the belief in its divine connection has waned.